Welcome back. We're super excited to have another episode of Raising the Flipping Bar. So what we're going to talk about in this one is finding the right contractor. And we know that there are just so many pitfalls that people can have when they're trying to find the right contractor that I think this episode is going to be super, super valuable, whether you're an experienced investor or whether you're doing your first flip. So as we always do, we're going to do a quick recap on our past episode, which was finding deals. And the top 5 ways that we find deals are: number 1, real estate agents. Seems kind of, intuitive, but a lot of people don't lean into building relationships with real estate agents. So be in that world, add value to those people, and pay referral fees. That's, pretty simple. Second one for us is cold calling. We use a cold calling company that calls 40 hours a week, 2 people at any given point, and we get a lot of deals from that. There's obviously some expense associated with that, but it's really our number 2 way to find deals is using a cold calling company. Key there is you got to follow up immediately and call those people back. Those warm leads are super, super important. The next one is networking. Again, we talked about 3 or 4 different areas, whether it's divorce attorneys, whether it's estate sales, whether it's family law, working with, senior citizen people in the senior citizen space. I think that's a way for you to dive really, really deep and network in those communities and find ways to deal source there. And then you jump into wholesaling, definitely working with both larger wholesalers and smaller wholesalers, but they're definitely a key piece to the puzzle of finding properties. And lastly is almost really what we're doing now, but that's digital media. So whether it's being on podcasts, whether it's promoting and producing your own content on all the social media platforms, and then the advertising component to that. So it's really just kind of taking those 5 different tiers and figuring out what works best for you from your skill set and most importantly, your budget. But what I wanted to really jump into on this episode is we've got Travis Masse, our senior project manager with Elevation. Travis, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So again, we're really talking about finding the right contractor and the best contractor to run your flips. But before we get into that, I think it's really interesting for people to have a little bit of background about you. So kind of tell us a little bit about your background overall before you even got into the, fix and flip or the project management space. Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I've worked in kind of the construction industry off and on throughout my time. I started out in a boutique kitchen and bath company. So we did kind of high-end faucets, fixtures, countertops, you kind of like your really expensive homes and sold and did the director of operations for that company for a long time. Around COVID, I transitioned and saw an opening with a general contractor who wanted me to come on as his project manager. Doing similar things as far as the clientele, high-end kitchen and baths, those type of remodels for him. Ran his business for a few years and then just had the opportunity to join the Elevation team, and it seemed like a good fit for me, given the construction background, the kitchen and bath background, to progress into Elevation.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about your sports background. That's something that I actually really enjoy that we have at Elevation, is a lot of our teammates do come up through the sports industry, and I actually think that's a great way, whether it's within our company or whether it's working with contractors. But tell us a little about your sports background.
Yeah, right. I grew up playing a lot of sports. Just as a kid, but really I did a lot of wrestling and a lot of baseball, traveled all over the country. God bless my folks for driving me all over and footing the bills for those events, but did a lot of that. And now I've kind of transitioned that into the CrossFit space. And it's kind of been a good changeover of all the sports, kind of the sport of fitness, and do a lot of CrossFit. Also have a pretty good passion for CU sports. Mm-hmm. My folks were really involved. My dad went there. I went there. And so it's become a lot more interesting lately. To be a CU fan, but it's fun to go. We've traveled to a lot of the games and go to both football, basketball, women's basketball right now is real hot for CU. So it's been a good time to follow them.
Awesome. And I think it's going to be great for our audience to really understand what you do from a project manager standpoint, because if we think about our audience, there's a lot of people that are just starting on their own. They're doing every piece of the puzzle themselves, but then they're also scaling up like us. And I know a huge way that we help grow the business is when I was able to step out of running projects, and you've got this great expertise, but just tell our audience what you do kind of on a day-to-day basis of running these projects.
Okay. And the first thing with running the projects is finding the right projects. And I'm sure we'll talk about that on other podcasts, but the first part is agents bringing us deals, clients bringing us deals. I'll look at the rehabs, address what we think that rehab budget's going to be, kind of give them a number so they know what to offer on these properties and what we're going to look like at the end of the road. So that's kind of before the project starts. Once we get under contract, it's running the day-to-day of the project, whether that's managing general contractors, ordering materials, keeping a budget sheet, looking at all of our expenses, managing the timeline through Monday.com, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, keeping things on schedule, and just checking in 2 to 3 times to the project, keeping eyes on it, and communicating with the general contractor on almost a daily basis, whether that's text message, WhatsApp, phone calls, just how are things going? How are your crews looking? Because they run into issues as well. So it's just managing those. And then at the end, getting everything kind of wrapped up, pretty ready to go through staging and hopefully the sale of the property.
Yeah, perfect. So let's really kind of jump into one of the things that we really look for is we actually have a questionnaire. And it seems probably to some people maybe a little bit of an overkill, but we want to know what their experience is all about. So maybe talk a little bit about what that questionnaire is and that process of working with our contractors that we're working with on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Generally, what we want to do with the contractors is get a feel for their capacity. So we'll ask them questions like, how many are on your regular work crew? Because a lot of general contractors have their regular laborers, but they also sub out things. Try to get a feel for what they don't want to do. I don't want to put a contractor in a foundation situation that they're not comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So what won't they do? What will they do? Where are they really good? Where do they need some help? Also looking at things like past projects. I want to know, where have you worked before? Can you do 2 or 3 projects? Are you more comfortable in a condo as opposed to single, family residence? Look at their W-9s, try to get those things in, right. Their insurance, get all those ducks in a row, their website, their contact information. It seems silly that we have to do that, but those are things that can get real sticky later on in a situation. So we try to get all those, check references, make phone calls, and see if they're dependable, if they're not skipping town on you, and doing the things that they're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that we kind of jump into is once you figure out who we're going to use and vetting them with the questionnaire form that you just talked about, it's really bidding jobs. And so I'm going to talk to you about the type of contractors we get into here in a second, but really I want to set the stage for our audience to talk about how do we bid jobs. And so what we're doing once Travis has identified this is the right contractor for us to work with is we're going to create a 1-page budget. And that gives the contractors the ability where if we're talking to 3 different contractors, they're doing what we call kind of that classic apples to apples type bidding, because you don't want to walk around. Everybody has different perceptions of what you want to do. But if you hand them that piece of paper for your scope of work, it's going to standardize what contractor A versus contractor B is getting back to us with. The other thing is we've got kind of a term that we really like called push pricing. And so Travis is great with handing them that sheet and then giving them a rough guideline to say, we've already done the math. We've already looked at the property. We've already budgeted it. If it's ideally before we purchase it, we know hopefully we're going to put into it from a rehab perspective. So we'll give them a guideline of, let's say, a $5,000 spread. So we'll go in and Travis will say, hey, we think that this is going to be an 8-week project. It's going to be between 75 and 80 grand. Here's the scope of work that helps them bid out the project efficiently. And then we really want to be clear about what we're doing as a company versus what the contractor is doing. So that really kind of sets the stage for how do we bid these projects. But I would really love for you to tell us a little bit about kind of the different types of contractors along that big spectrum of experience. So maybe give our audience kind of those key points about different types of GCs or contractors in general, maybe.
Right. When we're looking at flipping houses, you're going to come across all kinds of different experts or novices or what they're strong at or what they're weak at. So kind of the categories, we look at subcontractors, contractors, and full GCs. A subcontractor is going to be just a one-trade guy. He may be a countertop guy. He may be an HVAC guy. A classic, electricians and plumbers are just your subs. Generally, that's all they're going to do. They're not going to do your drywall. They're not going to paint for you. They're not going to lay flooring. So those guys are good to have. But if you were managing all the subs, then you're the general contractor and the project manager and the investor, and that's a lot of hats to wear. The next step up from that is a contractor. He may do a lot of his own work, but he may have laborers that he has underneath him. He may not be a licensed GC, or he may not be an expert in one area, but he's a handyman type. He can get the job done. He can do small projects, repairs. He can do some callbacks, those type of things. The third category is just the full general contractor. This is going to be generally 1 or 2 guys that are managing a variety of subs, managing a variety of contractors. They probably have several projects going on at once. They have 2 or 3 plumbers that they can call on if they need to for a different project, or 2 or 3 HVAC guys, and they're going to try to keep everything under their umbrella. The advantage to that is we don't have to deal with so many people. If I have to call, Felipe, the GC, and tell him, hey, we need this done, he's going to contact his subs and do it. It saves us some phone calls, and it really allows us to scale and have multiple projects going on at once. That doesn't always work that way, but generally that's kind of what we're looking at between those three categories.
Yeah. And so when we run things kind of the Elevation way, we were helping to share with our audience to your point, and I loved how you define what is the kind of subcontractor, contractor, and general contractor. We definitely find that we're giving up anywhere between probably $5,000 and $10,000 worth of margin by using general contractors. But maybe you want to share with our audience why we use general contractors and trying to run many things at once, and where things kind of come out in the wash at the end of the year versus you in there and being the PM or the GC, I should say, yourself, and the pros and cons maybe of spending more and using somebody who can run everything, or you being kind of in the weeds every single day on every project.
Right. With the advantage of a general contractor, say we have 2 or 3 projects going on at once. I may be a Tuesday at 123 Main Street. I can meet with the GC, and he probably has several different things that we need to talk about, whether that's plumbing, electrical, drywall, paint. I can talk to him about all those things while I'm there, and he can go talk to his subs. Then on a Wednesday, I can go to the next address, do the same thing with either the same GC or a different GC. If I was managing all the subs myself, I would have to be at that project talking to 4 or 5 different people and coordinating them and their materials and getting them going, then going to the next job and doing that. So I'd have probably 5 times the amount of the conversations, i.e. 5 times the amount of time, and it would eat up my day to be a GC and project manager. So we do give up a little bit of profit on that, but the thought is I can make 1 phone call, 1 text, and the GC can handle it from there and manage his crews accordingly. When we have multiple jobs going with that same GC too, it's good because he can delegate. Today we're going to have the plumber at this address. We're going to have the drywaller at this address. It's the same general contractor. He's dividing his crew up for us, and he knows where his guys are, where they're located, where the materials may be, and he manages sort of the logistics of that side of the business.
Yeah, and Travis brings up a great point that I want to share with you guys as our audience is there is that sweet spot of how many projects do you want one company or one contractor doing. We find that once you hit 2 or 3, that's kind of a nice sweet spot so that, to your point, you've got that familiarity. You've got somebody who's not kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul because you have, know where those workers are going. But also when you go up 5, 6, 7, 8, crews all at once, I think that's when you do rob Peter to pay Paul. And so I think it's really important for our audience to understand, again, everybody's different. Every business is different. Every market's different. But we kind of find that 2 to 3 project as the sweet spot. And then we also really ramp people up. So we do condos and townhomes, and we try contractors out and kind of see how good they are. And then they kind of graduate, it's like the minor leagues to the big leagues, if you will. Maybe talk a little bit about where you feel comfortable of knowing somebody's doing a good job and then giving them a shot for new business.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to the minor leagues to major leagues. A condo is a small footprint. Generally, there's not going to be foundations. There's not going to be a lot of HVAC. There's not going to be a lot of the complexity in a condo. It's going to be, a kitchen, a bath or 2, a bedroom or 2. So getting that sort of experience under their belt, 1 or 2 of those, because some GCs may be really good at the beginning or really good at the demo or really good at painting, but when they put it all together, they kind of fall apart. Yeah. So I really like to see them go through a project all the way to the end and then get through inspection. Mm-hmm. As we know, that's very important. Yeah. And then try them out on another one because then they know our system the second time around. So the second time around, they're familiar with everything we do, our systems, how we're doing draws, all of our finishes. They should be much faster and more efficient that second time around. And then we can kind of get an idea. Can they do 2 houses? Can they do a whole house? Can they do, a 3,000 square foot house? Yeah. We generally know by that second condo where they're going to be and kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Perfect. And one of the things we're going to dive a little bit deeper into in about 3 or 4 more episodes from now is the software that we use. And really, Travis, you're an expert at it, and it's called Monday.com. So I would love for you to kind of tell our audience a little bit about maybe just the 3 main sections of how we run projects. And then most importantly, how we're able to keep that as the most efficient way to run these jobs really on behalf of the contractors. So maybe give our audience kind of those top 3 sections, and we'll do a deeper dive a couple episodes from now.
Yeah, we have it sort of divided up. Sort of our way we do it is project planning, and that's going to be our sewer scopes, planning our budget out, doing the bid process, selecting the contractors, getting our timeline expectations down. So we have steps in that are checks and balances for us that we know if once we get to that point, project kickoff date, we're ready to go with the dumpster, we're ready to go with the first check, we're ready to hit the ground running. The next part is just managing the whole project. It's, when is when are kitchen cabinets going to go in? When are the countertops going to go in? When are the faucets going to go in? When do we expect floors to be finished? That gives us an idea of, one, our timeline, and it keeps our agents ready for the listing, the staging, when to market it, when to sell it. The other section of Monday.com that I find very useful is the materials ordering. We have basically all of our materials listed in there, and then we have working on it, ordered, whatever it is, and I can manage, I need to order sinks, or I need to order vanities, or I need to order pulls, and there are comments in those sections where I can update either you, or I can update our agents, or I can just write a note to myself, hey, we're 5 pulls short, we need to order more pulls, or look in our garage, see if we have them, those type of things. But that material ordering, that way we don't get to the end of the road and the GC says, I'm ready to install fixtures, we don't have any, and then we're in a scramble, and then you're paying extra money to get it shipped to you. But that just keeps me on track, and it's easy to look at it from a 10,000 foot perspective because it'll say green if it's done, or it'll say red if it's not.
Yeah.
So it's really simple to do, and it's good on the PC and it's good on your phone. So it's really an efficient way to manage the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into that. We'll do almost some tutorials for the rest of our audience out there. It's just such a great piece of software, and we've created, actually, they call them boards, but we've got about 105-step process to show you every little different nitty-gritty detail of how to run these fix and flips. And then kind of conversely, which is obviously, the focus of today's episode, is finding the right contractor. And so a lot of times we'll know whether it's good or bad if that person is willing to not necessarily follow every single step, because again, we kind of do that on their behalf, but we want to show them how organized we are, how detail oriented we are. Maybe you can talk a little bit about contractors being nervous to work with us as investors because they've probably been burned in the past with working, with those damn investors that aren't organized, that aren't paying on time. But maybe just tell our audience about where it's a two-way street of interviewing. We want to find the right person for us to work with, but we want to sell them and say, hey, we're organized in what we're doing. So it's a good marriage for the long haul.
Right. Yeah. A couple ways we stay organized. One, obviously, is the Monday.com. What I'll generally do is show them our board and say, listen, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get your second draw payment. And then once that second draw payment's done, you need to focus on getting the kitchen cabinets installed, the counters, the basin case, the paint, and then you're going to get your third draw. So they're not up in the air. GCs, they need that money. They need that cash flow to pay their crews. Yep. This gives them peace of mind. Hey, once I get this done, I know I'm going to get a good check. And there's no guesswork. It's not like we're going to come in and nitpick them and say, well, we want you to do this, this, and this. It's cut and dry. You meet these guidelines, we'll pay you your check. And that gives them a lot of, like I said, peace of mind to know that they're going to be there. The other way that we stay organized is all of our fixture and finish packages are all laid out. And I generally, during the interview process, I show them that too and say, we're not going to hem and haw about a kitchen faucet for 3 weeks. We're not going to order some crazy thing from Italy that's going to take forever to get in. So they know they're going to have the products there when they need them. They're going to be easy to install. They're going to be stuff they're familiar with. They're not some crazy brand that they're going to have to read up on. That's going to be a Delta or a Moen or something that their plumber's comfortable with. So they know those things are coming. We also do hanging file folders at every project that we work on that have all the plans in there, all the cabinet layouts, all the change orders, all the materials, our flyers, everything's there for them and their crew. Because some of their crews may not be in those early meetings. They don't know me necessarily at the very beginning. So all the instructions are basically there for them if they need them. That way their crew's not guessing and not in the dark. So as we meet with GCs, 99% of them feel we are the most organized, the most ready to go investors they've ever worked with. And I've had GCs tell me they would like to take our stuff and give it to their other investors because it would make their jobs a lot easier. Right. And that just speaks to, what you've created, what the whole company's created on being organized and kind of nerding out on staying on track. And it gives the GCs, a good sort of blueprint on how to do it. Yeah. That way they're not flying by the seat of their pants either.
Yeah. And obviously we could go on. This episode could probably be another hour to 2 hours long, but I kind of want to leave the audience with 3 key takeaways and maybe talk a little bit about our on-site meetings, and then how you talked about the folder. So I think we're good there, but mostly just kind of how you run it from an on-site meeting basis, and then the change orders and kind of touching base every week. Maybe give our audience that background.
Right. We generally like to meet 1 to 3 times a week on a project. Something in the early week by myself and the GC, and then usually Derek and myself and the GC will meet later in the week on the project. And we'll use that Monday.com board and say, hey, well, we're supposed to have this, this, and this done. Is it done? I'll take pictures. I'll write up a report. I'll generally use my chicken scratch on my iPad and then type it up for them at the end of the day. So that way they have documentation. We talked about these things. We've set these dates. We need to order this material. If there are any issues, we'll outline them in that kind of recap. Mention the file folders, all that stuff's available on the file folders. I also have a 3-ring binder with everything. So there's a hard copy in case something went haywire on the software. And then the change orders. We try to do change orders. If it comes, we need to address it. We need to get a price for it. We need to get a days that it's going to extend the project. We don't need to do the change order and then surprise at the end, there's $5,000. Every week at the end of the week, if a GC has a change order, he needs to let us know about that. And then what we'll do is take a few of those change orders, clump them together, and on their next draw, if those change orders have been done, we'll pay them that. We're not going to pay for a change order up front without them being done.
Right.
So we try to keep that really organized, because as early investors and early people get into this, they know that there's always a surprise at the end. Oh yeah, here's your bill, plus there's 20,000 in change orders. And we never want to get to that step. We never want to get to that. So we discuss those things every week. And then the meetings are always just good touch points to see what's going on, see if the work crews are there, having them at the end of the week, make sure they're working out through end of the week. Occasionally we'll buy them lunch on a Friday just to make sure we're getting all the work for them. And their workers love it. I mean, you buy lunch for one work crew and they love you forever. I mean, it's as simple as Domino's Pizza and they think you're great.
Yeah.
So those type of touch points on a project weekly is super important.
Yeah, and I think Travis does a great job in running our projects, is that we really want it as a two-way street. We want to be able to interview and kind of vet those contractors up front. Then we want that good working relationship over time. And so change order, essentially what that is, just to make sure our audience kind of has a good firm grasp of what we're talking about, is you've got your existing contract. Let's say it's $100,000 worth of work. We're going to do it for 8 weeks. And we've got, 50 pieces of the puzzle that we've got clearly outlined in our scope of work. A change order is when something comes up and we rip down a wall in a bathroom and find out that the plumbing that we thought was okay is actually shot. And so we've got to change the plumbing. That should dictate a change order, which means there's extra costs and there's extra time. But to Travis's point, where I think a lot of investors go sideways, and then it's not fair to our contractors either, which is they're doing extra work, there's taking more time. So then you need to know, okay, we gave you a specific end date, and we just need to move the goalpost or move the measuring stick a little bit to be fair. And then you need to know that week, how much is it going to cost before the work happens? Because where we get into this big, arm wrestling match is you do extra work and there's costs associated with that, but you need to know how much is it. Sometimes you have to do them, like the plumbing example. But a lot of times when we're doing our projects, there's certain things that you might not have to do. It can be kind of an optional change order. And we need to know, where's the market going? And if a contractor is thinking in his mind or her mind, yeah, to your point, well, I did $100,000 worth of work and I'm going to give them a bill for $20,000 and we aren't prepared for that, we might have overshot it and it's obviously coming directly out of our pocket. And then your contractor's pissed at you. And it's the opposite of a win-win. So for us, that's super, super critical, is those weekly check-ins and those change orders that are assessed every single week are super, super important. So I think that gives our audience really a sense of how to find the right contractor, some of those really kind of deep dive tricks and tips so that it's equal and fair on both sides. Is there anything else that you want to kind of leave the audience with as we wrap up this last episode on just finding the right contractor and anything that we maybe haven't addressed?
I think just that two-way street. I think building those relationships. I mean, you're not going to be best friends with all of them, but I think them knowing you're looking out for them, especially on their draws or especially on their workers, they know that you're taking care of them and they're going to take care of you. I think you see the HGTV ones where they're screaming and yelling and hating each other. That's not going to be a good long-term situation. So I always try to, learn something about the GCs, talk about other things outside of work and build those relationships, because then they're more willing to help you. I'm more willing to help them. And it's just a more enjoyable workspace. And we're going to get a better product at the end of the day. If they come to work begrudgingly, we're not going to get as good a product. If they come to work knowing I like working for this company, we're going to get a better product. So I always try to think of how to foster those sort of goodwill emotions out of those GCs every time we touch base with them.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited to have everybody tune in about finding the right contractor. The way we always end episodes where we've got a guest is I would love to learn a little bit more about you, Travis. Like, if you weren't in the real estate investing space, what do you think you'd be doing?
Something in sports.
Okay.
I don't know exactly whether that be broadcasting or owning a CrossFit gym, but something in the sports world I think would be super fun, and that's probably where I would go.
Okay, nice. Well, thank you so much for having.
Thank you.
We're really pumped to have you here. It's been great to have you on Raising the Flipping Bar, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
Thank you.